everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Words of Heart podcast. I am your host, Deon Sanchez, and joining me in this particular episode is Ann Hince. I hope I said it right. Thank you for joining me today, Ann.
Thanks, Deon. It's lovely to be here.
Awesome. So, Ann, if you could kick things off by sharing with my audience a bit about yourself, that would be great.
Sure. I had a interesting childhood, and then there was trauma in it. Both my parents were alcoholics. And when I was 19, I found my mother dead in the bathroom one morning when I woke up. So that was a huge trauma at the time, but I hadn't realized how much I suppressed it all. So it wasn't until I was in my late 30s and I went to a doctor's appointment and he asked me what my stress level was. And it was an 8 out of 10, which he didn't think it should be that high, given I was simply a stay-at-home mother with 2 young boys, which wouldn't necessarily, it could be stressful, but it shouldn't have been that stressful. So he wanted to know why that was. And it was because the tears from that event 20 years earlier was still just under the surface. So whenever I would think about it, the tears would come. So he used this strange technique with me, and I know you've talked about it on your show before. It's called EFT, which is short for Emotional Freedom Technique, and it's also called tapping. He used this technique with me for about 15 minutes, and I walked away from that appointment being able to tell the story of her death to myself without any emotions arising. And it just felt so different. It felt like a real shift that I had been looking for. So I was a software engineer in the past, so I like to know things work. So I wanted to test it for myself. So I had a 17-year-old cat at home that needed daily saline shots. And the first time I gave him one, my hand was shaking so much. I just wasn't going to be able to do it every day. It just was not going to happen. So I thought this is a great test case. So I actually tapped. I used the tapping technique. I tapped about the fear of hurting my cat, the fear of injections, my history around injections. And the next day, the needle just slid right in and my hand did not shake at all. So to me, that was huge. It clearly made a big difference. So I was sold on it and I started using it every day. I started catching myself when I felt emotional during the day and I would tap. And things started shifting so well that I wanted more. So I wrote down every emotional memory I could remember from my childhood. And I tapped on that list one each night until I'd gone through them all. And at some point during this process, I realized that my mind was becoming quiet. And I realized that the words that I had been saying in my mind to myself, the ones I'd been criticizing myself with and judging other people with, had been my dad's words that I had programmed inside of myself since childhood. But I couldn't see that until they were gone. My mind had to become quiet. And then I could look back and say, oh, those were my dad's words. And so I was just replaying them over and over again. So this was really powerful. That was the first step on my journey.
Wow. And I know you mentioned, obviously, it helped with giving your cat shots and the physical aspects of your body as far as implementing that particular technique. Do you mind describing a bit as to more detail as to how it has helped your physical body?
Sure. So, I'll carry on with my story then, because that was kind of the first step. So, and I've realized that the EFT and the tapping, it's always working on the physical body. It's just, we don't know it. We don't realize it to begin with. So even though we're working on emotions or memories, that's actually releasing tension in the body. So this whole process was kind of an expansion of awareness. When I started out, I didn't know how I felt about things. I suppressed everything so much. So I started to become aware of how I was feeling during the day, like the emotions. But underneath every emotion is a set of physical sensations, right? So if we're feeling angry, we might have tension in our jaw and our fists and maybe our solar plexus, our stomach, we're holding ourselves tight. So we tend to use the word angry, but if you go backwards into that, you can actually become aware of those sensations. So then I could work with those. I'd started to feel those, just to hold my awareness on them, which is what EFT does. It has you're holding your awareness on either the words or the emotions or the physical sensations. which is an expansion of awareness. And as I was doing that more and more, and I'd done all my childhood when I was doing the EFT. So I started to work on more collective traumas. So I would bring up the emotions, the memories I had from the big things like 9/11, like the tsunami, like the earthquake that I was in San Francisco. I would feel those feelings again and just let the tension of those pass through. And again, this is all working on the physical inside, the tension that we've held inside, the dis-ease that we have held inside. And at some point, I realized I could keep my awareness inside my body. And I would do the same thing. I would find tension inside my body and release it, and find more tension and release it. And at some point, I could actually put my awareness inside my head, and I could put my awareness on tension inside my face and hold the awareness there until it dissipated. And I could actually feel my bones moving at some point. It was a little weird, a little scary to begin with. I thought maybe I was hurting myself, but I knew it was the next part of the journey. So I just kept going. And then recently, this past year, I had new x-rays taken that I had just through orthodontic work. And it was just amazing to see that my eye sockets had aligned and my jaw had centered. It was way off to the side. And my neck, I have scoliosis, my neck is straightening, and even my tooth roots have grown. So incredible to me what we can do just with focused awareness, or just with taking, a lot of people are working with these kind of tools. You had someone talk about Havening on your program a little while ago.
Yes.
I've not heard of that, but it looks like it's very similar to EFT. So all these tools we can use, but if we go further than we think we can, if we just keep going, it can make some major changes in the physical body.
Absolutely. And considering how EFT, I hope I'm saying the technical term right, EFT, what it represents as far as the awesome impact it has for helping others through any anxieties or traumatic events. How do you feel EFT has played a factor with the pandemic season still going on?
Well, for those people who know how to use EFT, it can be incredible, right? Because what it does is it relaxes the body. It lets the energy or the emotions that we're feeling right in the moment, it just lets the energy that's stuck in the body dissipate, right? So if we're feeling anxiety about vaccines or non-vaccines or COVID itself or anything that's happening, if we just tap, and it's just tapping on the ends of meridian systems, just tapping on some points in the body as we're thinking or feeling those emotions or thoughts, it just relaxes you. It just lets that energy go. And when we're in a relaxed state, we're actually attracting more relaxation to us in the future. So I feel it can totally change the world if enough people did this. I've had some experiences, like I was on an airplane once, and you know how airplanes, if there's little kids or little babies on airplanes and they're screaming, I actually exchanged a seat with the father on this plane, and the mother allowed me to tap gently on the baby. And just in a few moments, just a few rounds of tapping, the baby fell asleep in his mother's arms. And everyone on the plane was just thrilled, obviously, because he was no longer screaming, right? So even something as simple as that, if the mother knew that technique and did it with the baby right at the start, that would change the experience of all those other people on the plane. Yeah, so if we did that on a daily basis, if everyone knew how to do that, if we did it in schools and had just the kids tap after break or after lunch to let the energy that they've all had riled up during break, to let that energy go, would just change the day of everyone who experiences it. It's quite remarkable. It just seems a little odd because you're tapping on these points on your body. It's a little weird, and to be honest, I didn't even like the name emotional freedom technique to begin with. It just felt really odd, so I didn't call it that. But it took a while, and I realized, well, it really does provide emotional freedom. So it really is a good name for it.
Absolutely. I even did a poem a couple weeks ago or days ago about how we can be really trapped in our emotions at times. So I think the technique which you've shared and other techniques people have shared on my podcast thus far is really freeing your emotions and the anxiety and the things that trap you or drain you or just consume you negatively and just weigh on you. So I love that this technique is in existence and that you're practicing it and using it to serve a purpose and to help others, truly.
Well, what we don't realize is that freedom is on the other side of those emotions.
Yes, yes, yes.
And we have to experience it. We have to experience it a few times to really believe that that's the case. And then, once I realized that, it's like I didn't want to stop. I just kept going.
Awesome. So I want to get to the icebreaker questions, which you already know one of them. I feel like you're worried about the second one, but just don't think so much and just breathe or tap because it's a really simple, fun question. My icebreaker questions aren't questions on like a PSAT test. It's a really silly all around question. So I'll start with the first one, which is my favorite one to ask. And that is if you had to come up with a title or chapter for where your life is at this precise moment, what would it be?
I would say I'm in the chrysalis phase.
Chrysalis phase.
Right? That everything is breaking down right now. And I'm talking in my physical body. And then that is reflected on the outside. So I am breaking down physical, the facade, the tension inside my bones and my connective tissue. It's in the breaking down phase, and I'm looking forward to what's going to come afterwards.
I loved how you explained that because as you were explaining, I'm like, how does this work? But I'm glad you like explained because some of the greatest things can come from broken places, which that's how I interpreted it. I don't want to like misinterpret it what you were explaining.
That's true. I actually think that the more trauma we have in our early years, the more capacity we have for spiritual growth later in our life.
Absolutely. So on to my favorite second icebreaker question. For those of you who have listened to my podcast in previous seasons, you are familiar with this question. I decided not to ask it, but just for Ann, I'm asking it for this particular episode. And that is if you had to have a superpower, what would that superpower be? It could be a funny one, it could be a silly one, it could be a normal power that you already possess.
Okay, I already feel like I do possess some superpowers, but the one I would really love is to heal other people.
Awesome. I think in a way you already do that with tapping. Or no, I'm not mixing up the.
It is called tapping. It is also called tapping.
Tapping, EFT. I feel like you're already doing that in a way. You're internally healing them through just a simple method. So this will be the part where no problem. This will be the part where I share my title, and I can share the superpower one, although I haven't done that since last season. So my title or chapter for my life at this precise moment would be a warrior for change. I've endured a lot in my life, health-wise, and it's strengthened me and made me a better person for it. So being a warrior really reflects and symbolizes who I am right now and what I have faced and will face from now to this point forward.
Nice.
Thanks. So the superpower, I'm chuckling because I haven't answered this since last season. Some of you are already familiar with the answer, but I'll share it because it sort of hasn't changed. My superpower would be for the possibility, I feel like it's possible because of the future, would be that for this podcast to be heard across other galaxies that have yet to be discovered.
That's pretty cool.
Thank you. Well, we can talk about millions of galaxies that have yet to be discovered, or we can talk about movies or anything else, but unfortunately, we are at the end of this winding road here on Earth. And thank you again, truly, for joining me. Do you have any social links? Do you have a book? Or if you do have a book, is it going to be turned into a movie on the moon? Give us the inside scoop as to how my audience can get in touch with you.
Okay, thank you. I did write my story down in a book. It's called A Pathway to Insight. And a bookseller to buy it. And
can you repeat that? My screen went all frozen at the second you started explaining it. So do you mind explaining it again? I'm sorry.
Sure. I did write my story down in a book. It's called A Pathway to Insight, and it's available on Amazon, or your local bookstore can order it. And I do have a YouTube channel where I have some videos where I talk about my story a little bit in more depth. And I have a public Facebook page that I'm really enjoying writing things on these days. So you can contact me there. I also have my website, annhince.com.
Awesome. Thank you again for joining me. And this was a wonderful conversation. And I also love that you listened to previous episodes, which is a real rarity to find when it comes to my guests. So thank you so much for doing that also.
You're welcome. I love them.
Awesome. To all my listeners, thank you for tuning into the latest episode of the Words of Heart podcast. If you enjoyed it, if it resonated with you, here are the ways to tune into this episode. You can find us on Facebook at the Words of Heart podcast. We're also on YouTube under the same name, and wherever you listen to your podcast, Apple, Spotify, and Google. Subscribe, leave ratings, reviews. Do whatever you can to extend this episode into the universe. And if you are listening to it from the moon, please let me know. I do want interactive broadcasting to happen. It's 2022. Anything is possible. But until then, right here on Earth, again, I am your host, Deanne Sanchez. Thank you again for joining me. And I'm always worried about messing up my guests' last names. Thank you again for joining me. I can't stop laughing, of course. But again, to my listeners, stay healthy, stay safe. If you want to get in touch with me personally as well, you can find me on Instagram at HeartWarrior25 and on Twitter at HeartWarrior24. So again, stay healthy, stay safe, and until next time, bye.